CBS Radio is marking its 50th anniversary. The network is marking the event this evening with a special 3-hour broadcast narrated by Walter Cronkite. Stand by for the segments of this broadcast recorded between 7 to 10 p.m. on the evening of Sunday, September 18th, 1977.
CBS Radio at 50, an autobiography in sound. Here again is correspondent Walter Cronkite with our CBS News special broadcast marking the 50th anniversary of CBS Radio.
We have so far reported on aspects of news, entertainment, and music in the history of CBS Radio. Now we turn to another memorable area, sports. Sports has become a major force in American life, says James A. Michener in his book, Sports in America. We devote more money and time to sports than most of us realize, and sports consumes much of our listening, viewing, and reading time. Sports coverage on radio is only as good as the people who report it. When the Columbia Phonograph Broadcasting System, as it was then called, first took to the air on a muggy September afternoon in 1927, the 16-station network did not carry a single sports broadcast. But Columbia soon realized how important sports reporting was to attracting audiences and began an all-out effort to cover the regattas, races, games, and other events of interest to its listeners. Early coverage sometimes demanded extraordinary ingenuity, even daring on the part of the reporter, requiring him to cover the event from an airplane or atop a telephone pole to get the story and beat the competition. The same year the Columbia Network began broadcasting, 1927, a young New Yorker with 3 years of broadcasting experience was hired at CBS. He began as an announcer, but soon specialized in sports, and for the next quarter century, he was at the top of his profession and developed a style of sports reporting that set the mold for many who followed. Ted Husing.
Ladies and gentlemen, from the inside to the outside, Jesse Owens on the pole. Lennart Strandberg of Sweden next to him in second lane. Eric Borchmeyer, the German, Borchmeyer. Jesse Owens is running in white shoes today. Ralph is running in black shoes. And here they go, down in the mark. They're set. The gun sounds and they're away, and Jesse Owens comes out of there with Ralph Metcalf. Jesse Owens starts moving. He's a yard or two out in front. Metcalf is coming second up on him. It's Owens, Metcalf, and Ozendahl.
The Ted Husing style was noted for its control and accuracy. Described as being able to bring you to the edge of your chair without screaming, his flow of language was such that Husing rarely needed to use the same descriptive adjective twice. Kentucky Derby of 1939 is an example.
Ted Husing speaking from Churchill Downs, the scene of the truest test in America for thoroughbred racehorses. A glamorous, colorful mile-and-a-quarter racing trial for 3-year-olds. No sporting event in this country has more appeal than this annual race, which will shortly be contested for the 65th time. And thus it demands a tremendous amount of interest throughout the nation, and annually brings a jammed-in crowd of sports followers to the track. Today is no exception, attracted by the hope of a truly run race by the field of 8 3-year-old thoroughbreds, the best available in the list of 115 nominations. The American racegoer has come to Louisville to see the great Bluegrass Classic. Since early in the dawning when the first peep of light descended upon the town, until even now, the fans have flocked to the racetrack. It is a scene of riotous color, a park in which thousands beyond count have taken over every available spot from rafter to fence to see the 8 racing machines do their stuff over the tortuous route of the race. Each horse will carry 126 pounds, and that is an impost that will decide a truly good horse when at last his nose flashes under the wire tautly stretched across the track. All the trainers vouch that their charges are in good condition, and when the ablest of the horses reaches the finish, the myriad fans assembled at Matt Wynn's track will roar a lusty huzzah to the winner. Since the time schedule...
Over the next decade, sports reporting became more sophisticated, and gradually the sportscaster was invented. No longer were random announcers assigned to cover sports events. Coverage was given to Husing and others who were beginning to specialize in sports reporting. Mel Allen was one of this new breed.
They assigned me as understudy to both Ted Husing and then Bob Trout, so that I was doing special events in sports as well as station breaks and anything else that staff announcers were supposed to do.
Allen arrived at CBS in 1937, fresh from the University of Alabama Law School, and got a job on Columbia's announcing staff. He had no intention of staying at CBS, or in New York City for that matter, but after a few months realized he liked what he was doing, was making good money doing it, $100 a week. and sensed that radio and sports had a future together. Allen's ability to talk extemporaneously for long periods of time made him a natural for sports broadcasting, and in 1939 he became the voice of the Yankees on CBS Radio.
Being with the Yankees was really a highlight because it was part of their great dynasty. DiMaggio was the greatest total ball player that I ever had the opportunity to see. There were many great ones like Willie Mays and Mickey Mantle and Hank Aaron and Roberto Clemente and so on. But as a total ball player, as a great leader, DiMaggio ranks number one. I remember one time when we were on a train traveling from one town to another, Joe had been in a slump, and I went by his bedroom on the train, and he was reading a book. I said, "Joe, may I drop in for a moment?" He said, "Yes." "Sit down." We got to chatting, and I said, "Joe, have you deliberately changed your batting stance?" And suddenly he looked at me. He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, normally your batting stance is one that has your 2 feet touching the inside corner of the batter's box. Lately, your right foot has been pulled back further." He knit his brows for a moment and looked at me, and he says, "Are you sure of that?" I said, "Yes." In any case, the next day we were in Cleveland, and he had resumed his normal batting stance, and he hit 3 home runs that day. How about that?
Joe DiMaggio, the Yankee Clipper, the total player, also knew when to retire, and in 1951 held a press conference to announce he was bowing out of baseball. CBS radio listeners heard it.
I feel that I have reached a stage where I can no longer produce for my ball club, my manager, my teammates, and my fans the sort of baseball their loyalty to me deserves. In closing, I would like to say that I feel I have been unusually privileged to play all my Major League Baseball for the New York Yankees. But it has been an even greater privilege to be able to play baseball at all. It has added much to my life. What I will remember most in days to come will be the great loyalty of the fans. They have been very good to me.
In the decade of the 1950s, sports was becoming big as a spectacle, big as a business. Walter Lanier Barber, the old redhead, with his easy southern drawl, was one of the leading sports broadcasters, known for telling it like it was. In an interview with CBS News several years ago, Barber talked about his early days in radio.
When you were the broadcaster at a microphone, you were the entire show, and you just tried to talk about what you saw. And one of the exciting things in the early days was the contest that never seemed to end between Graham McNamee and Ted Husing. They were always competing with each other, and one was going to outdo the other. I know that Husing was the first great technician as a sports broadcaster, and he was the soul of pinpoint honesty. I do the work that's given to me to do it as truthfully as I can do it, and if people like it, fine, and sometimes they haven't liked it.
The Columbia Network did like Red Barber's work, and in 1946 made him director of sports for the network. His main concern that year was the coverage of major college football games. That dilemma of trying to report the progress of more than one game led to an innovation in the broadcasting of sports that is now standard practice. That is, covering more than one event at a time. This enabled Barber to report on several important games the same day by linking the different remote locations to New York with open telephone lines. In a matter of minutes, CBS Radio could air on-the-spot reports from different locations around the country. This was a revolutionary concept. Until that time, the unwritten rule had been, never leave a game in progress. Also under Red Barber, sports documentaries began to be produced.
The CBS Documentary Unit invites you to play ball, to join a fast-moving tour of that wonderland of heroes, hullabaloo, and high finance known as baseball. But now, here is your guide, Columbia's Director of Sports, Red Barber.
Hello, everybody. It's the old redhead. We're taking the great dream of every American youngster, the dream of playing ball in the big leagues. And we're going to watch, step by step, as that dream comes true for at least one of them, one typical American kid. Finding him wasn't easy. We sifted through the roster of every big league club, ran through hundreds of names and mountains of statistics, until one day we turned the page, and there he was.
Reese Harold H., shortstop, Brooklyn Club. Bats right, throws right. Height 5'10", weight 170. Born July 23rd, 1919. Residence, Louisville, Kentucky.
Behind those cold statistics, we found a warm human story. We found Pee Wee Reese, a star and a symbol. His story might well have been yours. It still may be your kid's. It's the way one American boy worked to make his great dream come true. Well, Pee Wee, where would you say ball players come from?
Oh, no special place, Red. Anywhere.
You mean they even born like anybody else? And not just hatched out on a farm?
That's right, Red.
Well, where were you born, Pee Wee?
In Kentucky. Akron, Kentucky. That's near Louisville, Red.
And I don't suppose, young man, that you remember the circumstances.
No, sir, I don't.
I suppose I'm the only one who does. I'm Pee Wee's mother. But down here in Louisville, I had Pee Wee in our home in Akron. When they first showed him to me, he was just like any other baby. He was soft, red, and he squalled like all the rest of them. You couldn't tell if he was going to turn out to be a butcher or a ball player.
As the 1960s dawned, sportscasters began moving away from working exclusively for networks. They often were under contract to a team as well. This was the practice with many baseball clubs. For example, Phil Rizzuto, the New York Yankees shortstop, retired from active play in 1956 and was hired by the Yankees to broadcast their games on both radio and television. The next year, CBS hired him to do a network broadcast called It's Sports Time, which was heard on CBS radio for the next 19 years.
When I got the job, what I liked about it, I never liked to do anything on tape. And in those days, we did everything live. And I'd say, the first 12 years, every show was live. And I loved that because I like challenges, and you had to be right on time, and all the cues had to be right. And, you know, if you fluffed, you had to just keep right on going. I got a big break in two ways with Lowell Thomas. Lowell Thomas kind of liked me and was like a father to me and taught me so much about broadcasting. He got me to enunciate a little more clearly. Being from Brooklyn, a lot of people didn't quite understand what I was saying. And glad he did it in such a way that he didn't upset me or anything, but it was constructive criticism. That's the fact that I followed Lowell Thomas in about the first 10 years. And a lot of people just wouldn't turn, you know how people are, they got the dial on that one station they want. And so I would get the overflow from Lowell's broadcast, and it helped me tremendously, and he helped me tremendously in my career.
It's Sports Time with Phil Rizzuto.
Hi, everybody. Over the years, at least during my time, any list of the most respected college football coaches would include Frank Leahy, Red Blake, and Bud Wilkinson. In the professional ranks, there are two who come to mind: George Halas of the Chicago Bears and Paul Brown of Cleveland. The fact that Brown has been dropped as head coach of the organization he hatched from a chick into a full-blown Eagle in a very short time following the war and kept it at peak efficiency for so long has nothing to do with the current case.
In the 1970s, the treatment of sports on the network continued to evolve. Now, broadcasts had to be short and to cover as much ground as possible. CBS sportscaster Win Elliott developed a style that made the most of the airtime, and for the last decade of CBS Radio's first 50 years, the Elliott sound has been a feature on the network.
In this past decade or so, CBS has been part of an exciting, confusing, and nearly always spectacular world of sports. In baseball, Hank Aaron's record-breaking home run, or Lou Brock's record-breaking 105th steal.
Brock takes the lead. Ruthven checks in. He is going. The pitch is a strike. The throw. He is there. He did it. 105 for Lou Brock.
And the brilliance of the Yankee Pennant and World Series teams. In pro football, the Green Bay Packers, Miami Dolphins. And you remember the day O.J. Simpson ran 250 yards and broke Jimmy Brown's single-game record? Some of us thought that record would stick around for a while.
I don't think it's going to last all that long. 250 yards is a big day, but I think somebody's going to come up and get 300 yards one day, and I'd like to be the first guy to get 300 yards.
Gale Sayers, Johnny Unitas, Fran Tarkington. And as Don Klein saw it happen on October 31st, 1972...
And now George Blanda ready at the threshold of another great milestone in this fabulous career of Blanda's. Now playing in his 340th NFL game. The ball placed down by Stabler. Check. Blanda has the point. He has scored 2,000 points in his career.
Eventually, 2002. And you remember the American Football League and the New York Jets and the guy who made both of them happen.
New York's the city, man. This is the place.
Broadway Joe, they called Joe Namath.
It's fun, man. You go on Manhattan, people know you, and it's a great city. I wouldn't want to go nowhere else.
But time marched on, and for Joe Namath, it's now Hollywood and Vine. UCLA basketball under John Wooden. Unbelievable 10 NCAA championships in 12 years. And the players, Alcindor, Goodrich, Wicks, Rowe. And lastly, if not first, a giant redhead who seemed born to play basketball.
I've been playing since 4th grade, and I've just always been able to play basketball.
Bill Walton further proved that by leading the Portland Blazers to an upset NBA championship over the Philadelphia 76ers just this year. Wilt Distill, Jerry West, Cousy, Havlicek, and the incomparable Boston Celtics. In tennis, Rod Laver, John Newcomb, Ilya, Jimmy Connors, Billie Jean, 19 Wimbledon crowns for Billy, Chris Everett. And after waiting 25 years for a horse like Secretary to win the Triple Crown, it happens again this year.
Seattle Slew is under a hand right, and he's going to take it all. We're coming to the line. It's Seattle Slew that wins it by 2 lengths.
And the Preakness.
We're coming to the line, and it's Seattle Slew that wins it by 1.5 lengths.
The Belmont.
There's that finish. Seattle Slew wins by 4 with Dean Truget waving his whip as he crosses under the wire.
Undefeated. Unparalleled is the word for hockey's Gordie Howe. At 49, he played with his 2 sons on the same team. Pele arrived, and seemingly so has soccer. And we lost some people in sports, too. Vince Lombardi, and...
I'm the only one left now that was with the Dodgers alive. I'm for the knuckleball pitcher all my life, even if I can't see now. Goodbye.
Casey Stengel's last appearance in public. In golf, there was Jack Nicklaus, Arnie, Gary Player, Miller, Tom Watson now, and thank the Lord there's still Sammy Snead.
I still enjoy playing. When I lose that, why, then I'll hang the shingle out. I've gone hunting or fishing.
Son of a gun, Sammy is now 65. A.J. Foyt's 4 Indies, and of course the new era in sports, exposure, expansion, the new leagues, WHA, ABA, WFL, and that announcement out of Toronto in 1974.
Signed 3 of the greatest football players in the world, Larry Zonka, Jim Kick, and Paul Warfield.
And the very next year, the NFL strike. The New England Patriots refusing to play an exhibition game with the Jets.
The team met, and at 3 o'clock they decided to go on strike, and at 3:15 they left Schaefer Stadium, refusing to play tomorrow's game, and the strike thus means that they will refuse to practice.
There was a strike in baseball. Umpires struck. Basketball referees struck. And then the instant millionaires, the free agents, Julius Erving, Andy Messersmith, Reggie Jackson. Nobody knows where it'll end. Like the greatest golf shot in all history. You remember Al Shepard's shot on the moon?
Here we go again. There we go. There's the tie. One more.
Miles and miles and miles and years and years and years. And like I said, Walter, CBS has been a part of an exciting decade in sports. And as we go into the 80s, as far as I'm concerned, it's only the beginning.
To sum up the lot, the life, and the loquaciousness of the sportscaster in covering 50 years of CBS Sports, CBS News correspondent Charles Osgood puts it this way.
For many fans, and I am one, sports will never be such fun as once they were when distant cheers fell upon our youthful ears. Those games were of a special kind. The field was laid out in our mind. The cracking of the ball and bat, as by our radios we sat, the pop into a glove or mitt, that thrill of some important hit. At games they carried on the air, the voices made us feel right there. The winning, and sometimes the losing, spelled out by Barber, Allen, Husing. No Summerall and no Jim Kelly yet, but Phil Rizzuto and Win Elliott would give their colorful reports on all the major news in sports. Think back and you can hear them now. Someone saying, "Holy cow!" and someone else with Dixie Cool saying, "Well, I'll be a suck-egg mule." In victory or in defeat, it was we who sat in the catbird seat. I miss those days, and can you doubt that? You do too? Well, how about that?
We'll continue CBS Radio at 50, an autobiography in sound, with a look at half a century of radio drama. I'm Walter Cronkite, CBS News.